Hello and welcome to On Life Health's webinar series. I'm your host, Michael Detner, and today I'll be joined by my co-host, Ashley Benningfield, to discuss the topic of overcoming procrastination. Ashley is the clinical coordinator for On Life Health, and she's been with us for over 8 years. She holds a bachelor's degree in dietetics from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Ashley is a dietitian who is also certified in tobacco cessation. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks, Michael. As you already know, my co-host is Michael Detner. Michael is On Life's clinical specialist in behavioral health, and he's been with us for about 5 years. He holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from Purdue University and has worked in the behavioral health field since 1995.
Thanks, Ashley. Let's stop stalling and start discussing procrastination.
So today we're going to look at 3 main questions. First, what is procrastination? Second, why do people procrastinate? And third, how can procrastination be overcome? First, what is procrastination? Before we go into the actual definition of what procrastination is, let's take a minute and think about what comes to mind when you hear the word procrastination. You may think of words like postponing, putting off, delaying, or leaving things to the last minute. And for most of us, this is pretty normal in our lives, and it's okay. But according to the Center for Clinical Interventions, procrastination is the making a decision for no valid reason to delay or not complete a task or goal you've committed to, and instead doing something of lesser importance, despite there being negative consequences to not following through on the original task or goal. Like I said, everyone procrastinates sometimes, but surveys have shown that approximately 20% of people are chronic procrastinators, and they will deliberately look for distractions. And unfortunately, in today's society, these distractions are increasingly available. Take your cell phone, for instance. Just in that one small device, there are so many things you can do. Obviously, you can call someone, you can text message, you can chat via instant message, you can search the internet, shop online, play a game, post photos, listen to music, and even watch your favorite TV show. And of course, we all know that if we aren't sure how to do something or if we want to know something, there's probably an app for that. So next, we're going to look at why we procrastinate.
Thank you. And well, before we look at the topic of why we procrastinate and the details involved with that psychologically, there's one very important point that I want to emphasize or re-emphasize. And that is, procrastination does not just spontaneously happen. Nobody accidentally procrastinates. As Ashley just pointed out, it's about a decision-making process. If you remember the definition that we just read, procrastination is about a decision-making process. If I am procrastinating, it means that I've gone through a decision-making process. As a matter of fact, I've actually made 2 decisions all at once. The first decision, if I'm procrastinating, that I've made is to not do the task that I need to do, the most important one. The second decision, which happens almost simultaneously, is I have decided to do something else instead. So I've decided to not do something important. I've decided to do something less important. And I make these decisions, and this is the tricky part, I make these decisions with the knowledge that there are probably disadvantages to enacting this decision-making process. In other words, there are usually consequences, and we all know it. So the important thing here is to remember that no one accidentally, procrastinates. It's a decision that people make consciously. So if the decision is made, and I'll show you here with this little spotlight tool, if the decision is made to procrastinate and to do something else, it sets in motion sort of a fairly complicated psychological process that I'll show you here. The decision is made, and so I respond by delaying what it is I need to do, the important task that's at hand. When I delay that task, even for just a little bit, it's going to produce some anxiety. Sometimes that anxiety is very, very low-grade anxiety. You might not even notice it, but the anxiety is there. Now, on an unconscious level, whenever we feel anxious, we always are naturally looking for something to distract us from the anxiety or to self-medicate and make the anxiety go away. So we look for a distraction. Now, when we find this distraction, it winds up being the very delay that we started doing in the first place. So we continue to delay. The anxiety comes back only in a deeper layer this time. There's another layer of anxiety. We medicate that anxiety by distracting ourselves and by delaying. And this cycle just repeats and repeats and repeats throughout the procrastination process. And what begins to occur is a person can really start to experience some very significant anxiety. And anxiety is really, really an unpleasant thing to deal with. The longer you wait to complete the thing that you've decided not to do, the more anxiety you're going to experience. And this cycle is very much like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and heavier the longer you go on. So the important thing is to find ways to stop that.
So in order to overcome procrastination, we have to understand why we tend to do it in the first place. If you don't understand it, you can't really develop an effective strategy to overcome it. So we've identified 6 reasons people procrastinate. They may be stressed or suffer from anxiety. They may rebel and want to be in control of everything. They may have difficulty concentrating and become easily distracted. They may be afraid of failing, for example, or they could be dealing with some personal things in their life or other lifestyle issues. We're going to look at each one of these in more detail, starting with stress and anxiety. Michael?
Right. Now, if this is you, if you tend to be prone to stress and anxiety, you might want to think about it this way. Many times, what will cause us to make that first decision to begin procrastinating something is ideas and thoughts that we have about the actual task itself. If you're saying to yourself, inside your own head, I'm just too overwhelmed by this task, I'm too worried about this task, it's too hard, I can't even begin working on it because I'm so anxious or I'm so stressed about this task, your thinking might actually be a little bit in error here. So one of the things that you can do if you're really worried about a particular task and you find yourself feeling tempted to put it off, is to ask yourself, okay, if I start this task, if I just start it, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? Would you suffer physical harm? Would your loved ones be endangered? Would the sky fall on you? And oftentimes, I would say the vast, vast majority of times, the answer to that question is nothing really catastrophic is going to happen. So that's one thing to think about, and not about the whole task itself. What might happen if I just started this task, okay? What you're doing, if you don't get a hold of that question and don't realize that things aren't as bad as they seem, is something that mental health people call catastrophizing. It's from the word catastrophe. Another way of looking at that is maybe making a mountain out of a molehill. The thing is not as bad as it seems in the moment. Some people call it awfulizing. This is just so awful, and that causes stress and anxiety to become even more. The main thing is to focus on starting the task. I can't emphasize that enough. Not finishing the task. The task is too big to handle all in one piece. When you focus on finishing something, your attention is directed toward an ideal future. And all of the tasks that go on with it. And while visualizing a finished project can be motivating for some people, for someone who's having a hard time staying on task, it can be kind of overwhelming. So that's why it's important to start to focus on starting the project or task. Forget for a minute about the finish line. Just concentrate on getting that first foot on the ground, getting past that first step, and change your thinking to focus on what's happening right now. For many people, and I hope maybe you found this true, for many people, once you actually do sort of hold your nose and jump in, once you get started on something, even if it's not much, it's a lot easier to get motivated and eventually to stay motivated and eventually finish the task. So just the simple task of starting something is usually sufficient to build enough momentum to keep the ball rolling. A second reason that many people procrastinate, and I should say that it's not always just one reason. It can be a mix of these various things. But the second one I wanted to talk about here is what we call rebellion. And if you look at there's a stubborn mule here. If you look at the kid, and she's not exactly charming, but I thought it was a good illustration. Um, this issue of rebellion is all about control. And it's one of those psychological phenomenon that goes way, way back to our childhood when we were first learning how to live in the world. We learn when we're very small, at a very young age, that we feel more in control of our world, of our lives, when we sometimes defy authority. Imagine a bratty little child saying, "You can't make me." That's a very empowering statement for a little person to say, especially to a big person. You're bigger than me, but you still can't make me do what you want. And that feeling that comes from that power and that control, is something that many people long for as adults, because we learned it as children. Many people long for this power and control so much that they'll wind up shooting themselves in the foot, figuratively speaking, actually doing things that are bad for them, like, for instance, procrastinating. So if you're prone to procrastinating on tasks that are given to you by perhaps an authority figure, like maybe your boss, maybe procrastinating on doing your taxes because the government is telling you you kind of have to do this, right? Any authority figure, if you find yourself digging your heels in and procrastinating on things that are given to you by an authority figure, a question you may want to ask yourself, and just to bring this into your consciousness is a good thing, is this really a big issue? Is this a hard thing to do? Or am I sort of rebelling? Am I being a rebellious brat? And you don't have to answer the question out loud, but it's something that's kind of good to look at inside yourself.
The next reason we're going to look at is the reason of difficulty concentrating. And a lot of times people have difficulty concentrating because they're distracted. And like we said before, distractions are everywhere. And if you think about it, it can actually be fun to kill time these days. It's really easy to do. You know, you have the internet, the TVs are everywhere, Blackberries, iPads, iPods, video games, you name it. It's available. But technology and the internet aren't the only distractions. They can even be at work. Take your email, for example. I mean, who wouldn't get distracted with those email chimes constantly going off? I know I do. Whenever I see that email notification pop up, I'm constantly checking it to see who it's from, if it needs an urgent reply. I'm constantly responding right away. Even if I'm working on something, you know, and I'm on the roll, on the ball, whatever, I will stop, check my email. Which reminds me, Michael, did you know that I found this statistic that according to a report in 2007 by the Associated Press, that the U.S. gross national product would actually rise by $50 billion if that little icon and that chiming sound would actually disappear?
From email?
Yes.
I did not. By how much?
$50 billion.
So they figured how much the email chime and the interruptions that it involves. Yes. Actually, it boils down to money, I guess.
Yes.
Very interesting.
And you know, at work, it's not just your email, but also your coworkers. You know, they may be on the phone all the time, chatting with other coworkers. They may be in meetings, and you know, they're not closing the door. They are typing away on their keyboards. All of these things can be distractions and keep you from doing your work. And even if your desk is cluttered or messy, you can get distracted by that. So you want to make sure that you are able to work efficiently and keep on task. So if you're having difficulty concentrating, you want to ask yourself, what can you do to change your environment? And I'm going to go over some of these examples in the next section, but think about that if this is something that you struggle with.
Yeah, and there are also, I would say from a psychological perspective, we often think of attention deficit disorder or ADHD as a childhood disorder, but more and more over the past several years, more and more adults have been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And many people have found that once they're treated for that, the difficulty concentrating is really, the difference is quite remarkable. I had a coworker years ago who we actually had to make special accommodations for her because even with her treatment, she was still so easily distracted that her work would really suffer. So there are reasons other than just perhaps being a little flighty or having lots of noise around you.
Good point. Great point. The next reason that we're going to look at is the reason of fear. Take the fear of failure, for instance. If you're afraid that something isn't going to turn out the way you want it to or turn out very well, you might avoid this task so that you can avoid the feeling of fear. Another example is the fear of imperfection. Perfectionism and procrastination actually go hand in hand. Perfectionism propels procrastination. And perfectionists set such high standards for themselves, and because they expect so much from themselves, they procrastinate because they're afraid about whether or not they can actually achieve those standards. And they also tend to ignore their progress on something. So until that project is actually complete, they feel as if they aren't even getting anywhere.
Once again, breaking it into smaller pieces, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
So if you fall into this category, you may tell yourself, if I don't do this perfectly, I'm a failure. Well, to overcome this, you need to ask yourself, realistically, how true is this statement? I mean, think about it. Is it really true that a less than perfect task means that you're altogether a complete and total failure? Probably not. So try to replace the I must be perfect mentality with I can be human, because we are all human and we all make mistakes, and that's okay.
Right, and fear is a big barrier for many, many things. A mentor of mine once said that the majority of procrastination is fear-based, and it's so important, and we'll talk about this in more detail in a moment, it's so important to know what's going on inside your own head. We're always talking to ourselves, whether we like to admit it or not. We're always talking to ourselves, often about ourselves. And if we hold ourselves to irrational standards, like I must be perfect, I have to do this correctly, and if I don't, terrible things will happen, that helps, it perpetuates that fear and makes it much worse. And it's very much like anxiety. It can be very paralyzing. So the next thing to look at here, as far as some various reasons for procrastination, are personal issues. Life is full of stressful situations. You can't get around that. That's just the way life is. There are sick kids, there are financial problems, sometimes we have relationship problems. And while it would be nice to have a switch, to turn those problems off, that's just not realistic. It doesn't work that way. And the thing to keep in mind is that, even during very stressful times, every person is just one person. And sometimes life throws at us more stuff than one person or 2 or 5 or 10 sometimes can realistically handle. And that can lead to a real paralysis and a real need to make that decision to procrastinate and do something else, even though you know that the payoff might not be particularly good. And the other point is, as human beings, part of our hardwiring, part of our nature is the fact that we are social creatures. We can't survive without other human beings in our lives. It just doesn't work that way. And that's why it's okay not just to ask for help. Sometimes it's absolutely vital to ask for help. If you're going through difficult times that are standing in the way of your productivity and so forth, sometimes just a simple conversation with a friend can really make a difference, just to sort of get those things off of your chest. At other times, it may take someone who's trained to help professionally, like a counselor, a therapist, perhaps a doctor. There are even support groups for various issues that people go through. Another thing is many employers, many companies offer what we call an Employee Assistance Program, or EAP. And you may want to check to see if your company does offer this. It's a completely confidential resource where you can get a certain number of counseling sessions totally free of charge throughout the year. It's a wonderful benefit. Many people work for companies that have EAPs and they don't even realize it. So definitely check into that. So as far as personal issues go and so forth, one thing to look at is, oh, I'm sorry, I went a little far there. Ask yourself, when do I ask for help? At what point do things get so bad that it becomes way too complicated? So that's a good question to ask yourself. At what point can I no longer handle all this on my own?
Right. And two, I just wanted to add one thing. Going back to the fear that I just talked about with the EAP, they don't know you. Really, they won't judge you, so you don't have to be afraid of being judged.
Right.
So that's a good point, Michael.
Exactly.
So the next and final reason that we're going to look at is procrastination because of lifestyle issues. And we all know that it's important to eat healthy, get plenty of sleep, exercise regularly, and avoid alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. But if someone isn't doing these things, it can really affect their ability to make decisions and to work effectively. So first, let's talk about eating. If you're not eating a well-balanced diet, you're not giving your brain the fuel that it needs to function properly. So if you aren't fueling your brain properly, it's going to be more difficult to think, make decisions, organize, and get things done. Next, sleep. A lack of sleep can affect your ability to think clearly. And if you're tired, how motivated are you really going to be to start exercising or start on that project that your boss needs you to have done by next week? How about exercise? Exercise is good for the body. We all know that. But it's exercise that gets our blood pumping and provides oxygen to our brain. And finally, we all know that it's best to avoid the use of alcohol and other substances because these impair your thinking and ability to make wise decisions. So when it comes to living healthy, we know that change can be hard, and one of the hardest parts is just getting started. It's not that we aren't capable of exercising or eating healthier, but it's just too easy to procrastinate, and we can always start tomorrow or next week or next year. So here, ask yourself, what area can you improve in? What can you add, remove, or change that will lead you to a healthier lifestyle? And one key thing that I want to add is when you think about what changes you can make, remember to think small because it's really those small changes that can make the biggest differences.
Right. And the thing with procrastination is making the decision to procrastinate is actually not hard to do, as most people know. It's pretty easy to begin procrastination. It's the consequences of it that are pretty bad. So you need to have your mind and your body in really good working order in order to combat procrastination.
Yes.
For instance, as Ashley was saying, it can affect your health. Why might you be procrastinating to set a quit date, to quit tobacco, for instance, or to start exercising, or to perhaps, here's an example. Many people procrastinate going to the doctor for their regular checkups or for their maintenance vaccinations and so forth. What is that about? Is it about fear? Many people are really kind of afraid of doctors. So beginning to look inside your own mind and look for some of these reasons for why you might be procrastinating on something is really a huge first step in combating the habit of procrastination.
So now we've defined what procrastination is, and hopefully you've been able to identify maybe why you do it. So let's move on to how you can overcome it. We're going to look at 6 strategies for this. So the first one we're going to look at, Michael?
And we should point out here, there are more than 6 strategies for overcoming procrastination. There are probably 6,000 when you get right down to it, because different people have different approaches. But we, when Ashley was putting this together, we decided that these are pretty useful things. The first tip as far as breaking this habit of procrastination is, this sounds very simple, acknowledge it. You've heard perhaps with substance abuse and addiction recovery type things, the most important step is acknowledging that there is a problem. Simply acknowledging that this is a problem, that you have a habit of procrastinating, is a very, very important way of at least getting started on the path to getting better about this. And along the same lines, and you've seen this slide before, I know, is looking at some of these reasons that we've given you. Begin to identify which one of these or which combination of these sort of plays into your own style of procrastination. Do you tend to be prone to a lot of stress and anxiety when you're facing a new task? Do you have maybe a little bit of a rebellious or like I said, bratty side about you, and you just want to be defiant and feel in control? Is it an issue with concentration, fear issues? Are there personal issues or lifestyle issues that you need to take a look at? So beginning to become familiar with the fact that it is a problem, and also begin looking for an underlying reason, that can lead you to the next step, which is to begin taking some concrete action.
So one of those concrete actions is to make a list. and there are great benefits of writing things down. So you want to make a list of the things that you want to accomplish and then arrange those things based on their priority and urgency. And then as you complete them, go ahead and check them off, because this will give you a sense of accomplishment, and it can also be a great motivator, because it's just that important to recognize that even the tiniest progress is considered success. Just the simple fact that you're moving towards your goal can be a great motivator.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
The next one is to remove your temptations. And I touched on this previously when I discussed the difficulty concentrating. And again, temptations are everywhere, cell phones, emails. So I wanted to highlight just a couple of things that you can do to help overcome these temptations. First, with the emails, go ahead and maybe turn the email sound off, or better yet, close out of your email. I know that some people here, I think, Michael, you do, maybe kind of close out your email and take a break away from your email.
There do come times where at first it's a little bit difficult. It's sort of like cutting off your own arm, but
yes.
Eventually, if you do get into the habit of only checking your email maybe once every hour, once every 2 hours, a lot of distractions can be saved that way.
Yes, yes. The next one, turning off your cell phone or putting it on vibrate. But I know for me, for my cell phone, even the vibrate option is it's quite annoying, actually. So it can be just as loud as a ring almost to me. Also, ensure a good working environment. So like we were saying before, if you have a cluttered desk or a messy desk, it's going to be quite distracting. So clear it off, clean it off, and get organized so that you will know where things are. And also make it something that you want to look at. If coworkers are being loud or meetings are going on, try going into an empty office or conference room and getting some work done. All of these things you'll be able to remove those distractions, and you won't be tempted to get on the internet or talk on your cell phone.
Exactly. One particular thing, a lot of people these days are actually telecommuting or working from home, and that was a bit of an adjustment for me when we were first allowed to do that here at On Life Health. Because I have a big screen TV in my living room, and I have a really, really wonderful dog who is lots of fun. I had to remove myself from the temptations, and now when I work from home, I work in a separate room that's just dedicated to that. So you can remove the temptations from your environment or remove yourself from the temptations.
Yes.
The next tip is very broad, but hopefully it'll give you some ideas, is to look at reframing your thinking. In other words, evaluate the thoughts that you have automatically. As I said earlier, everybody talks to themselves. We have an internal dialogue with ourselves going all the time, and we're constantly evaluating our surroundings and our situations and so forth, and we're often having these conversations with ourselves. The question to ask is, what are you telling yourself about a particular task that you're deciding not to do, that you're deciding to postpone? Okay, it's just too hard, it's unpleasant, it's boring, I can't do it, I'm not good enough. Along the same lines, what are you telling yourself about yourself? I'm a failure, I have to be absolutely perfect, I'm not good at this, everybody else is better at this than me, my work is not very good, this paragraph is badly written. The thing is, once again, it's very, very important to change your outlook if your outlook is impeding your progress. And very important, avoid calling yourself names. I'm terrible at this. I'm stupid. And many people call themselves names, and it really does cause a lot of problems, and it sets you back, and it makes that temptation toward procrastination really, really strong. Using positive self-talk is another way of saying reframing your thinking. Every time you catch yourself saying something negative, stop, evaluate it, and rephrase it, and then check how you feel. At first, it may just seem to be a simple matter of word choices, but when you try this simple way of reframing your thoughts and reframing the ideas that you're having about your surroundings, you can begin to recognize thinking habits that you can then learn to correct. And the next technique is actually one of the most useful things. Ashley's going to tell you about the Pomodoro technique.
Yes, and you could even use this at home, Michael, when you say you have a wonderful dog. So you can even reward yourself with your dog, taking a walk with your dog using this technique. So it's usually best to avoid working in long stretches and instead scheduling, small frequent breaks, work for a few minutes and then schedule a break and then work again. So like Michael said, this is the Pomodoro technique. And with this, you get to reward yourself. So first, you want to get a timer. This can be a stopwatch, an alarm clock, or like I said, there's probably an app for that.
The kitchen timer.
Yes. And set it for 20 minutes and work on one task. And when that timer goes off, even if you're on a roll, if you're doing good, stop and take a break for 5 minutes. Do something enjoyable. Take a walk with your dog, a friend, call a friend, read your favorite blog. Do some desk exercises or stretches. And then when those 5 minutes are up, resume the task for 20 more minutes and repeat. I think many people have found this very helpful.
It is very helpful. And so it's 20 minutes on with the task.
5 minutes.
And even if you're doing great, when that timer goes off after 20 minutes, take that 5-minute break and then come back and just repeat the process until you've gotten to the point where you're either done or you're at a really good stopping place.
Right.
I've heard lots and lots of people talk about how simple and how useful this technique is.
Right, and when you reward yourself, you have something to look forward to, and then when you come back from that enjoyable break, you'll be more productive.
Exactly. And finally, the last one is fairly cut and dried. Most trained behavioral health experts, whether they're counselors, therapists, social workers, anyone who works with human behavior, usually has some form of training in the topic of procrastination. And sometimes when your own tips and tricks aren't quite doing it for you, it may actually pay off in the long run to meet with someone, sit down, and have them help you identify not just the reasons behind your procrastination habits, but to give you some very concrete ways of looking at it. Like I said, there are therapists, even your physician may be able to help. It may be important to rule out something like attention deficit disorder, or sometimes people with certain levels of depression or anxiety disorders can have a great deal of time deciding to not procrastinate. So it may take a little bit of extra help, and it does turn out to be very much worth it if that's the direction that you might want to go. And as far as some final thoughts here, I did have one. There are many books and many resources on overcoming procrastination. One of which that I read years ago and probably I found to be the most helpful is a classic book. I believe it was first published in the mid-'70s by Dr. M. Scott Peck. The name of the book is The Road Less Traveled. It's still in print. It's available very cheap in paperback. It's a marvelous book, and probably the first third of the entire book is about procrastination and some very good insight and some ways to overcome procrastination. And it goes on to say how overcoming procrastination can affect the rest of your life in really very profound, very meaningful ways. So I recommend The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. I can't say enough about it. And it looks as though we have kind of reached the end of our webinar. I just want to say thank you to Ashley for working so hard on this and for your wisdom and expertise. And most important, thanks to all of you who have decided to tune in and join us for this webinar. You're the reason we do it. And hopefully take what you like and leave the rest. We hope that you've picked up something and maybe you're a little bit more well-equipped than when you first signed on. For On Life Health, I'm Michael Detner.
And I'm Ashley Benningfield. Please join us next time and have a wonderful day.